Hello, everybody. This is Chris Berry. I'm the Vice President of Communications and External Affairs at Florida TaxWatch. I'm joined today by Kurt Wenner, our Senior Vice President for Tax Research, and we're here to talk all things budget for the next legislative session. Kurt, thank you for being here with us today. Where are we in the process for putting together the 22-23 fiscal year budget?
Well, there's been certainly work going on behind the scenes, but the legislature is getting ready to come back into session. Interim meetings start next week. There'll be some appropriations meetings, but the big news is that the legislature just got some very good news from state estimators. They're now forecasting that they will have a $7 billion surplus when they put together the next budget for fiscal year 22-23.
And the way that they project that is that's done through what's called the long range financial outlook. What is that?
The long range financial outlook, it's a constitutionally mandated annual report that looks at the next 3 years, compares the expected revenue available to the expected expenses. Basically, they take last year's budget and they add on things they have to add on, like increased enrollment, and also things that they've been funding above the base budget. They usually do a 3-year average of spending. So basically, it's doing the same thing that they've been doing with some growth built in. It's a real good document to just let kind of get a look at what's going on in over the next 3 years. But this one is different than anyone I've ever seen because of the size of the surpluses. $7 billion in the first year, growing to $10.3 billion in the third year.
So that does, I mean, if you back this whole thing up a year, we were here last summer looking at this and potentially looking at some pretty significant shortfalls. How is this possible? Like, where did the extra revenue come from?
Well, actually last year's financial outlook, which was done 12 months ago, showed that the legislature would be facing a $2.7 billion shortfall last year. That obviously didn't come to pass. The main reason being that federal funds, and also the fact that Florida's economy and the government revenue that it produces has rebounded a lot faster than everybody anticipated. Ever since the first revenue estimating conference after the pandemic began, where they reduced the estimates by billions of dollars, each subsequent revenue estimating conference has increased them a little bit, including the last one, which had a significant increase to where we're actually above pre-pandemic levels. We have now collected more money from fiscal year 19-20 through fiscal year 21-22. The new estimate says that we will collect more money than was predicted before the pandemic began for those same 3 years. So from a revenue standpoint, it's almost like it didn't happen. And a lot of that has to do also with federal aid. A lot of the money that it put in people's pockets through increased unemployment benefits and the stimulus checks, that helped spur the economy. And the estimators have said that's had a bigger impact than they expected.
Yeah, that's interesting. And we're currently working on a paper outlining all the federal aid that has come to the state and is still to come to the state. And there's certainly a lot of it. What kind of things are we expecting then with that sort of a surplus next year? What are the big GR needs? What are where do we think that money may end up going?
Well, according to the outlook, we have plenty of revenue to meet whatever needs plus growth that's happening. I think obviously we'll see a big appetite for member projects and things like that. And it's the big ones, but you look at what the federal funds have done, and the main focus has been on what we received in the CARES Act through the virus recovery fund, and now through the American Rescue Plan through the state fiscal recovery fund, about $11 billion or so. that's gotten most of the publicity because that's something that the state has at least some discretion with. There's tens of billions of dollars that have come to Florida, particularly in areas like education, childcare, affordable housing. Education, Florida's been allocated about $15 billion, which is actually going to the districts, although the legislature did appropriate some of that last year. So not only have the federal funds helped us to meet our current needs from the coronavirus, it's allowed us to do a lot of investing in things that we've had a big backlog in. We've already put more money into transportation. They put a lot of the American Rescue Plan money into environmental things, water. So there's been some, even deferred building maintenance on state facilities, which has been a long time coming. And, some more construction projects for university and colleges, which hasn't got as much funding as normal. So it's going to be it's a good guess as to what they're actually going to spend all this money on. Hopefully we'll spend everything that we have to spend in the time frame, so it doesn't go back to the federal government or other states, but they should be fairly deliberate with this. We do have time to spend most of this money. It's not all supposed to be done in the first year. We have so much dollars to deal with that they need to really think about this and hold on to it. Because if you remember back in about 2007 when the housing bubble burst, state and local governments found out what happens when you spend all your windfall profits that came in through the housing boom. So you don't want to do that. You don't want to spend all this money, particularly on recurring projects, since this is non-recurring, and then have the economy go south again or something. And all of a sudden we're in a big budget problem. But, we also have more federal funds coming that aren't included in that $7 billion. We'll receive still about $3.5 billion in that kind of semi-discretionary funding that's coming that hasn't been obligated yet. And that's the law says that will go into general reserves too. So the actual reserves that they'll have is over $10 billion for this year.
To keep in mind or keep an eye on during committee weeks this fall, session next winter?
Just realize that we have more. It's probably the best fiscal position the state has ever been in, which is unbelievable when you think about the pandemic and what happened to government revenues at first and the cost. But on top of all the federal aid we've gotten from the stimulus packages, FEMA is reimbursing direct coronavirus response expenses that the state has 100%. So things that come up about actually dealing with the coronavirus, the state is not on the hook for any of that. There is going to be a big problem with Medicaid because the rolls have grown so much. They're coming down a little bit, but we may be losing the increased federal aid that they gave states at the end of this year. When that happens, the state share of this higher base of enrollees is going to be, the state share is going to go up considerably. It could be extended. They're talking about extending it. That would help with that. But, Medicaid is the big spending issue in the state right now.
Okay, great. And it'll be interesting, I think, to see where our annual budget turkey watch list ends up with all this money floating around. I think, we've recommended for years now that the member projects be curtailed and drawn back in, and now it's just going to be a potential buffet line of it. So
it's probably right there.
Yeah. So thank you for being here. Thanks everybody for watching. We're going to keep doing sort of weekly updates during committee weeks and during session this way. So if you want to keep track of what's going on from the Florida TaxWatch side of things, please do stay tuned. Keep an eye on our YouTube channel and social media. And any links of things we mentioned will be down in the description below. And subscribe for more updates. And thank you very much. Thanks, Kurt.
Thanks, Chris.